So it's 22 minutes before 9 here on the program. The UN Refugee Agency, that's the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in cooperation with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, has organized the first ever UNHCR Africa Consultations with NGOs and multi-stakeholders. The UNHCR Africa Consultations with NGOs and multi-stakeholders seeks opportunities for major progress in bringing solutions to the refugee crisis. But to tell us more, I'm joined in studio by the UNHCR's Assistant High Commissioner, George Okoth-Obbo. Good to have you. Thanks so much for being our guest here on the program. Now, we talk about this issue with multi-stakeholders and NGOs, I suppose, to try and explain to the average viewer, what is this all about? Why is it happening here in South Africa and Southern Africa?
Okay, so first of all, I'm very delighted to be on this program. Thanks for having us. As we sit here, there are 70 million forcibly displaced people on Earth. If you put all those people together as a country, they would be the 10th largest country on Earth. What we're doing here in the meeting that started yesterday recognizes that to respond to the situation of these 70 million displaced persons, and particularly to help them recover their lives and move to membership in society, that effort is done as a whole of society effort by all segments of society, by all actors of society, and particularly by communities. So this meeting is to bring together some of the key players. We have agencies, we have humanitarian actors, the business sector is present in there, to ask ourselves the question, how do we move forward in locking hands together to help the people that we are entrusted to serve, including refugees?
So to understand it correctly, it's almost finding a regional solution and a local solution and understanding how it actually, the dynamics work in different countries and different areas, to try and help the situation, as opposed to putting one blanket solution over the crises that we see happening around the world?
I think all of the above. But if you had to ask me, of all those levels that you have chosen, which is the most important one, that, and particularly our meeting here prioritizes, is what happens locally on the ground. Because refugees and people who are displaced and people who are involved in stressed mobility or another, they come with a range of issues that need to be responded to. But they do not live in the air. They set themselves in society, and that society also brings a range of issues. So it is clear that in finding solutions, it has to be solutions that work for everybody.
So there is a fundamental difference between a migrant, an asylum seeker, and a refugee. And we know this, but I don't know if that is common knowledge to people. I don't know if there's just one blanket thrown over anybody that is in a strange country trying to start a new life. If you could perhaps talk to us about the difference of these, and then maybe we can talk to the local issues that we as South Africans are facing right now.
I think, to put it in a very brief way, is that we live in a world, and I think this is important to say, in which it should be the freedom and the option of every human being to move as they wish or to fulfill the desires and needs that they have. Refugees in particular are in a different position, because they are forced to have to leave the countries in which they belong, the countries of their birth, the countries of their citizenship, to find safety elsewhere. So the key difference between a refugee on one hand and a person who might be described as a migrant is that the migrant is not compelled to move to find safety and protection. The refugee, because of persecution, because of violence, because of conflict, because of other factors that neutralize the safety that the individual should be able to reach to find at home, is forced to flee, cross a border, and to find safety in another country. This is the big difference.
And it is a big difference, and yet I suppose when it comes to certain issues that affect the locals, and that's what we're talking to here, because let's bring it to South Africa now. As it is right now, South Africa's economy is under a lot of strain. There are very few jobs to go around, if any. And this is also a bubbling problem within societies, within communities, where they see whether they be legal or illegal immigrants, refugees, or anybody coming in and getting the jobs because they're prepared to take it for a cheaper price or they're working for lower salaries. And this, of course, creates a lot of uncertainty, and it creates this anger amongst communities. And then we see some of the incidences that have been happening in our streets. How do we try and get around that? Because as much as you want to help, there are not enough resources to go around.
You know, all the 54 countries that make up our continent have, in fact, taken the position and working towards an approach which says that countries, communities, societies benefit from each other. That we will have a continent that is interlinked in terms of trade. We will have a continent that is linked in terms of economy. And we will have a continent that will be linked in terms of mobility. This is continental. When it comes specifically to refugees, allow me to say two things. The first one is, quite frankly, I would no other way of putting it, it is a myth, it is incorrect, it is wrong to project that refugees are a source of risk, a source of danger in the societies in which they find themselves. The opposite is true. They are at risk. They have lost safety, they have lost protection, and they need the solidarity that, quite frankly, they get even here in South Africa. But the second and most important thing, the overwhelming evidence shows that in every society, in every community in which refugees are present, they are always a benefit to themselves and the community in which they sit, in all ways. But the one that you asked me about is in economy and in labor, in employment, that always they are a benefit to themselves and the communities in which they settle down.
Yeah. So a lot of South Africans also say, because South Africa has a policy where there are no refugee camps.
Yes.
So you will come into South Africa as an asylum seeker or a refugee, and you will be allowed to come into society and work, or under different rules and regulations, obviously. But some say, if we're going to be that lenient, why don't we rather just have refugee camps on the outskirts and not endanger the lives of these refugees further by letting them live in societies and in communities that are unstable at this point? Again, how do we maybe talk to that solution? But I'm talking to the South African context.
I don't know if you have been a refugee or had a relative, a friend who has had the experience of being a refugee. Think about it. If you were a refugee, and particularly if you're a refugee who has been forced to move because of a very terrible experience that has dislocated and broken your life, immediately upon looking for safety, a camp may be an immediate solution. But does it come to you as the place where you would like to spend the rest of your life and the life of your children and the life of the community immediately around you? In other words, the question you asked me earlier on about the risk of refugees being a burden, the risk of them exerting pressure on national resources, is increased by corralling them in a camp where they belong to, where they depend on relief assistance, where everything has to be extended to them, rather than giving them the opportunity to be the agents of their own life. So in fact, the better and the far more successful approach for both the refugees themselves and the communities in which they live is to provide them the opportunities to be able to work, to be able to contribute to the societies in which they are, and particularly to be able to compete and to work hard like all other members of the society to realize a future for themselves.
So we're seeing this morning an air piece from Nigeria that is going to be, I suppose, just to put it in one word, evacuate around 600 Nigerians out of the country that are feeling unsafe, that feel that they can't be here because their lives are under threat. The current situation in South Africa and these xenophobia, Afrophobia, I don't know, they're given so many words, and unfortunately, where at the end of the day, this is a crime against humanity in the greatest sense.
Yes.
Is this on the UNHCR's radar? Are you looking in on this, and what is your response to it?
Okay, please just give me the opportunity to say a few words on this one.
Please.
The first one is that UNHCR is strongly concerned and really outraged by any case in which anybody, I would be saying this if it was South African nationals who have become the victims of gratuitous violence. But UNHCR is certainly outraged that anybody, but allow me to talk of the persons that it is our job to help ensure that they get protection and safety. We are deeply concerned that they become the victim of gratuitous violence. As I am talking to you right now, we have people in our office who are terrified and have nowhere else to go. And they're asking us, where shall we find our safety? So we are very concerned about this. But this is not a moment for just lamentation. Where we are is that we will work with all agents, above all the government, and I would like to appreciate here that we have had cooperation from the government authorities, not just now, but in all other incidents in which incidents of this nature have occurred, to ensure that people are safe, that people are protected, but to find solutions and to address, hopefully, as we can, all the factors that cause these outbreaks of gratuitous, of instrumentalized violence against one community and another. Now, yesterday at the workshop that we are having, I had already had and actually read, I think, in a newspaper that some governments would be evacuating their citizens from South Africa. So I asked a South African himself at that event, what do you think about this? And his response is exactly identical to how I see this, which is, in a sense, it is unfortunate that moving forward is basically saying that foreigners, refugees, etc., can no longer be present in South African society. And that the only way that their safety, their security, people who have lived here, who have businesses here, who have relationships, who are proud members of the society in which they are, that, oh, now, the only way is you have to be evacuated as the condition for your safety. I think where we should be is where people feel safe, where they feel confident to continue to be members of the societies that has been their life now. But of course, everyone else is free to be able to travel back to their country of origin or another.
Let's leave it there for this morning, but we thank you so much for coming in and talking to us and giving your response as well to the current situation in South Africa with regard to the attacks on foreign nationals. We have, of course, got in studio with us the UNHCR's Assistant High Commissioner, George Okoth-Obbo, who is here in South Africa with a cooperation with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, where they have organized the first ever UNHCR Africa Consultations with NGOs and multi-stakeholders. Let's take a break. We've got Democracy Gauge after this. Stay tuned.